Hello and welcome to the third episode of the Overlanding podcast, a podcast dedicated to vehicle-dependent travel. I'm your host, Andy Smith. Throughout the series, I'll be chatting with adventurous people who have chosen to travel the world by bicycle, motorcycle, car and truck. The aim of the podcast is to discover what motivates people to embark on life-changing journeys, why people choose to travel in this manner, and to hear some incredible stories along the way. Before we get started, I need to tell you that the Overlanding podcast is now available on iTunes, where you can subscribe to get the latest episode direct to your device. If you're not an iTunes user, you can also hear the show on Stitcher. You can download the free app today from your app store. You can listen directly on our website too, at the overlandingpodcast.com. In this episode, I caught up with an old friend of mine via Skype, so the sound quality isn't crystal clear throughout. Luckily, it doesn't detract from the insightful content. My friend Jack has recently cycled the Americas, and in the podcast we talk about the trials and tribulations of undertaking a mammoth cycling adventure like that. Okay, let's not waste any more time and jump straight into the conversation. Let's get started.
Okay.
We always ask the same question at the beginning of every podcast, which is the generic question which kind of sets the scene. So, out of these 5 locations, where would you prefer this interview to take place? A, near a babbling brook in a lush green valley. B, in a little tent on a windy mountain top. C, on a warm beach with sea lapping at your feet. D, round a nighttime campfire in a forest. Or E, deep in a tropical jungle.
Oh man, those are quite tough. I think I'll go for the campfire. I think because it's an interview.
Yeah,
it's pretty productive, like pretty conducive to good chat. The flickering flames and stuff. I wouldn't have to look at you. I could look at the fire, that kind of thing.
Okay, well let's just take a second to appreciate the sound of the fire and suck in our surroundings.
Okay.
Nice.
You're going to start all of them like that?
Yeah, we start every interview like that. Typically, the campfire is the most popular. And it's conducive to good campfire chat, you know, and that's where you meet other travellers around the campfire. Okay.
You don't want to edit it in that, but I just realised I've forgotten my vaporizer, and I'm going to need nicotine in the next hour. Can I run away for a second?
You certainly can run away for a second. I'll pause it.
Alright, I'm back. Sorry about that.
Okay, all good. For our listeners, just to put this conversation into context, this podcast will probably sound more chatty and conversational purely because Jack and I have known each other for quite a long time. I was trying to work it out. It must be at least 12 years, right?
I think the first time I met you might have been when you were working at Grange House. You were running this art course, and I was in this phase where I was wearing like corduroy 3/4 lengths I cut off myself with like yellow and black suspenders. What do you call those? You know, like that go over your shoulders and hold your trousers up.
Oh, braces.
Yeah, braces, along with like a long coat that was made of a picnic rug. And I remember you just being like, who is this guy? He's turned up.
Well, obviously I need to chat to you. This looks like someone I can be friends with. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we've known each other for quite a long time. And so it was quite... it was really cool. One day I looked on your Facebook page and I saw you were embarking on some kind of mega trip. I was quite excited by that. And for a couple of reasons. One, certainly you and your brother are two people that don't do things by halves. When you get involved in something, you kind of jump fully in at the deep end and just kind of crack on with it. So when I saw you were embarking on this trip, I was like, yes, this is going to be an adventure. So can you just kind of tell us a little bit about... Well, actually, first, if you could just state your name and just introduce yourself a little.
I'm Jack Crisp, and yeah, I just got back, well, from a really, really big holiday, a really long holiday.
Perfect. So, your big trip you went on, you're a cyclist. So
I am, yes.
So there's certainly a different dynamic. Like most of our listeners so far have probably got to our podcast through our kind of overland travel. So most of our listeners currently, and we're hoping to kind of switch this, are more than likely 4x4 drivers.
Yeah.
We may have a few motorcyclists who follow us at the moment, but we want to basically keep the podcast mixed up. To certainly include cyclists and motorcyclists as well as 4x4 drivers. So as a cyclist, I think there's a different dynamic where if I'm in the car, I'm relying on that car to work. Whereas as a cyclist, your bicycle kind of relies on you. So that already the dynamic is completely different.
Oh, that's interesting, yeah.
So, like, how did you decide initially that you wanted to do a bicycle trip?
Well, I used to work in a camping shop, and I would see like all these 18-year-olds who just finished their A-levels, planning their gap years and stuff, and they would be buying, I don't know, loads of crazy nonsense that I just don't think they would ever really need, and you'd be talking to them about where they were going to go, and it was always the same places, and I just found myself thinking all the time, like, if I had that much time and that much money at my disposal, I would not do it like that. And most of my time working in that camping shop was spent just planning how I would do it. And, after a little while, I worked out it would probably be overland. I would either do hitchhiking or cycling. And I wanted to go around the world and just, see all the places in between, everything that you get from overlanding that you don't get from just flying from spot to spot and taking these 28-hour bus rides and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And, yeah, basically I just hit a point in my life where I suddenly realized, I was just going to be working to wait for a year for a certain job interview.
Yeah.
Because of the way my career works. There's the next job I needed to get they're pretty hard to find. And I pretty much knew where I wanted to work. And I had about 12 months. I had money in the bank. Didn't really have much in the way of responsibilities. I don't have any kids. I don't have a mortgage. I don't have any debt. Just like, oh my God, this is it. I could do it right now. And so, I pulled the trigger, and I just started telling everybody, like, yeah, in the next, I had a friend's wedding, and I was like, after the wedding, I'm out, I'm going.
Yeah.
Started buying all the stuff and going on the internet and all the fun part, and all the preparing and getting the stuff together. And then, just left. It was great.
So,
but I changed from around the world to doing the Americas because I really wanted to get something out of it that was a bit more concrete, so I wanted to learn Spanish.
Okay.
And I didn't like the idea that if you go around the world, you're always going to be hand signals and stuff like that. I know that is still cool and you get a lot out of it, but I really wanted to feel that I had cracked a culture and that, I could really kind of, by the time I got to the end, I could really understand the people and...
Yeah, and communicate.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so once you'd kind of made that commitment, and it's interesting to hear you speak there because and I think we mentioned it in the previous podcast, we find that when people are traveling, they normally fall into three categories. They're either looking for something, running away from something, or they generally just like traveling. So from what you've just described, your trip had a purpose. Which I think is quite important because a lot of the times people leave on trips like this not really knowing what they're getting into or the actual reasons why they're doing it to some degree. I think people feel they need a change in their life. So for you, it was more a case of, you had a particular purpose, which then dictated where you wanted to go. What came first? Did you decide you wanted to learn Spanish, or did you decide you wanted to go to the Americas and as a result Spanish would be what you learned?
No, I knew I was going to do a big trip. I wanted to do the big trip, either the hitchhiking or the cycling. Kind of set on cycling because I love it so much. Before I left for years and years, I pretty much go everywhere by bike. When I lived in London, when I've been living here in Guernsey, Nottingham, just love cycling. I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
And so really that's absolutely what came first. But then the Americas thing was dictated by this opportunity to learn Spanish.
Okay.
But it's interesting you said about like having a purpose because actually while I was out there and beforehand to a certain extent, I actually tried really hard to not have a goal, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like to not actually have a big purpose to the trip. And, you know, a lot of people go out there and they're like, oh, you know, I want my trip to be like this. I want it to be epic and I want to be doing this many miles a day and I want to be, you know, I want to meet this kind of people and stuff like that. And, you know, I want to get laid with loads of beautiful Argentinian women and all this kind of thing. And I felt like the more you try and have expectations about your trip and say my trip is going to be like this and my trip is going to be like that, that's when you could be disappointed.
Yeah.
And actually, I really wanted to just kind of, I guess, you know, I used to study a bit of Buddhism back in the day, and it sounds a bit hippy-dippy, but like, you know, I didn't want any attachment. I wanted to just accept how the trip kind of evolved itself, have a very general thing of just cycling south and being a cyclist, and then just let it evolve from there and just see what happened.
Yeah. I also think when people set out with a certain purpose, there's certainly room for failure, because in such long trips like this, you know, unpredictable things happen, and then you can be left disappointed that you haven't actually achieved your goal.
Sure.
Which,
yeah, I mean, like if you break a hip halfway down.
Yeah.
Or like...
And the other thing I found quite interesting about your trip as well, a lot of people who undertake these kind of trips, and myself included in this, for us, kind of sharing our experiences was something quite important. And we obviously set up a website, YouTube channel, and we've basically turned into kind of media whores and pimped ourselves out. But what I really liked about your trip was, you know, every now and then you'd stick up a few photographs on Facebook, but it was through your personal Facebook, so you weren't treating the trip as some kind of commercial endeavour or some kind of, you know, great shared experience that you had to share with the entire world. Was that something that you consciously thought about before you left, or was that just the way it turned out?
No, that was definitely something I thought of. I mean, one of the beautiful things about doing something like this, and you know, it's not something sustainable the way I did it, because I just had savings and I just spent my way through them very slowly, like as I rode.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's not many opportunities you get to go like 18 months without having a job. It didn't appeal to me, the idea of making this fake job for myself where I have to like work writing. Oh no, I got to do the blog. Oh yeah, I'd love to come out, guys, but I've got to stay in and like write 1,000 words for some people on the internet, and I'm not even getting paid. No way, man, no way, absolutely not. I wasn't interested in that at all.
Yeah. I can totally relate to that, having actually had to endure that. And what it does, it actually puts a lot more pressure on you to actually deliver also, because once you've made the commitment, you end up with people following you, start getting loads of messages, and people, you know there's an audience out there who are expecting to hear something from you.
Yeah, or even worse, there's no audience.
Yeah, that's true, yeah. And I think that kind of added pressure of delivering to that audience actually detracts from the enjoyment slightly of actually kind of fulfilling, you know, the trip, or actually just getting on with the trip.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. And but I did certainly enjoy looking at your photographs. Definitely, it was.
Thanks.
And I think people do live vicariously through other people's trips. So as much as you might not have thought it at the time, there would have been a lot of people looking at your photographs going, you know, I'm in this crappy job and I can't do that trip, but I'm kind of living that trip through Jack's eyes. And certainly,
is that how it works though? Because whenever I was working behind a desk and I'd see people's photos, I would just think, I hate you.
Yeah, well, I think you have to be really careful. I read somewhere about this guy who was a travel blogger, and he had written this really interesting article that there's a really fine line between that. He said you don't want to be coming across as showing off, because your audience will just instantly hate you. You have to offer the correct amount of your soul, or the you know, not be too condescending. You know, I'm great, I'm here in South America, I'm having the best time in the world. I think you have to bear the correct amount of your soul. So if you are going through absolute hell, if you share that, then people can relate to it. Whereas if you're just posting photographs of you, like, I don't know, in a rubber ring floating around in a swimming pool constantly, I think that generally annoys people.
Yeah, sure. And there used to be this guy who used to, he's a Guernsey guy, and even before he left, and he would be in South America all the time. He would be like in Colombia and stuff. He would travel, and he was very good at getting jobs out there. And so he did a lot of traveling. He spent most of his time away from the island and in South America and stuff. And every now, I would see always on Facebook these photos of him on like lovely beaches and stuff like that. Man, I'm so jealous. I'm so jealous. And then when I got out to Colombia, we bumped into him. And I was chatting to him and stuff. And he's a really interesting guy, but sometimes he gets a bit unsatisfied with where he is. He's a bit of a grass is always greener kind of dude.
Yeah.
And he was saying like, when I get really down and I'm feeling really sad and lonely, and all my friends have gone back to Guernsey and I've got to make a whole new set of friends because all their holidays are over or whatever, I just post a photo of myself on a beach onto Facebook, and I just see everybody commenting on it, be like, "Oh, you have the best life" and stuff like that. It makes me feel so much better. So he was purposely doing it to just kind of rile people up and make them feel better about where he was.
That's pretty funny, but it can be. You start experiencing, and I should have like all different feelings, because sometimes the trips can grind you down, and then you start feeling quite resentful that I should be appreciating this more. I should be having more fun than I'm having. I should be happier than I actually am, because no one else is actually having the luxury of doing this. So then you feel guilty that you're not getting as much as you should out of that particular trip, and certainly on a bicycle. And I love cycling, and I've spent a lot of time cycling when I was younger. And before we left on our trip, I was really considering a cycling trip more so than taking a vehicle.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I had serious concerns about was spending that much time inside my own head. If I'm sat in the car with my wife, we're having conversation. You're forced to have conversation. She's rarely more than about a meter away from me.
Yeah. God, that sounds like a nightmare. I couldn't do a trip like that with somebody else. No way. Well, the alone thing worked way better for me. I'm an introvert, so it's just perfect.
Yeah, well, that's what my next question was going to be. Like for me, that level of introspective kind of that kind of mindset of being that introspective, I think has problems. Basically, like from my personal experience, I remember I did one trip to San Francisco on my own. I flew there, and I had the worst time ever because I had no one to share the experiences with. There was no one I could talk to discuss all the things I was seeing, but I guess if you're traveling on a bicycle. But you weren't travelling alone the whole time, though, right?
No, I wasn't, and I hadn't travelled alone before, so I was worried about that as well. But I think I really do have a personality type where, even when I was back in London and stuff, like I go to restaurants alone and stuff like that, just go and have a meal by myself.
Yeah.
Go and do things just like all on my Todd, and I like that. I like the time that I spend just for myself. That's when I recharge my batteries.
Yeah.
I'm not recharging when I'm being sociable and seeing people. That's like a bit of a drain, and actually it's the time I spend alone that. Yeah. But I feel it's kind of what keeps me going, I guess.
Yeah. But even if you're cycling, though, even if you're cycling with someone else, they're generally 200 metres ahead or 200 metres behind, or you're not typically cycling next to each other, chatting.
So there was this guy, Martin. I'll give a shout out to Martin Wong. He's my boy. I rode with him for 3 months. Kind of down the coast of North America and into Central.
Yeah.
No, into Mexico, and then he fell in love with a Mexican, and I carried on.
Yeah.
And then he caught me up later. We did another 3 months together down in South America, and he's the only one that I spent like a lot of time together. But definitely the first 3 months, we were spending like an intense amount of time together, and that was pretty crazy. We were saving money, just getting single hotel rooms together, just like sleeping in the same bed and stuff like that. It's really strange coming back because nobody knows him, or none of my friends know him, but I know him like as well as I know any of my friends.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird. But yeah, I found that super intense. I mean, how long did you spend with Emma in total? How long were you away for when you add up?
If you add up
the trip,
if you add up the entire trip, it was 853, I think it was, days, and for a majority of that, we slept in the roof tent. And we're obviously driving a lot, so pretty much 24/7 within arm's reach of each other. Yeah,
because I have to say, like, the end of each of those 3 month periods, I just wanted to chop Martin's head off. Like, I really was so sick of him.
Yeah,
unbelievable. I would be like fantasizing about stabbing him and stuff. It was I'd just be so sick of him. I don't know how you could spend. I mean, he is a super easygoing guy as well.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you could spend so much time, like, so close to somebody all the time. Would you make sure you had time away from her, or
no.
she had to escape you sometimes, or anything? You were just in each other's pockets, and that was just fine.
Yeah, generally in each other's pockets. We certainly don't have any secrets, and when I don't know, I think there are times when it is difficult, and that we did at one point make a plan. It got to the point where we were going through a bit of a tough time, and it was like, yeah, we should probably, make sure we spend time away from each other. And we tried doing it, and it was just like we both had exactly the same things that I had when I was in San Francisco. We went out and would do stuff, and I'd be like, I've got no one to talk to. It's just rubbish if I'm on my own. I've got no one to talk to about the things I'm seeing. I'm not sharing those experiences with anyone, so we found it really quite difficult.
That's interesting. But I think there must just be a key personality difference, really.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know, we work quite well together as a team, and we bring different things, and so we end up to complete our trip. We have to, like, there's no way I could have done that trip on my own, no way. And I think Emma likewise. Like, we bring different things to the table that basically. That basically mean we can do our trip. It's so we bring different skills, and I think that helps when you have to rely on someone else. But at the same time, it can be quite restrictive and a little bit limiting, having that reliance on someone else. But
sure.
I think it's those dynamics are what's interesting, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted to set up the podcast, was to discuss these things. Because they're generally a lot of the questions that people ask us before they go on trips. We have people contacting us going, how'd you get on with your wife in such a small area? And the truth of it is, we didn't know until we left whether that was going to work out. We could have
for sure. And the same with me going alone. It's like you don't really know, like, whether you're just going to go crazy just being out by yourself all the time.
But the kind of diving headfirst like you did into that. I think you end up learning a lot about yourself, and so how do you feel like throughout the duration of your trip? Has it changed your outlook on life massively, and in what ways?
Yeah, for sure. Hang on a second, I'm just going to do a call. Excuse me. Yeah, it did actually. I really thought that there was quite a big chance that I would come back and I would just, I work in an office, my career just keeps me in an office and stuff, and I thought there's a chance I could come back and just be like super hippie and just be like, no, I'm not going to go back to the office, I'm just going to get a patch of nettles on the cliff and just, go and tend my nettles and just be, just like take a big swing into hippie land, like I've been a bit of a hippie in the past, and just come back and be like, we're all one, I'm a vegan now, and I just decided that blah, 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 but it really didn't happen like that, and if anything, I've gone the other way. I've just really become quite disgusted by ideology in general. It undermined all my fixed beliefs. There were a lot of things that I just accepted as given, and I kind of questioned all that. And now, really anti-ideology. That's been a big change. But I think also I've kind of become a bit desocialized. Like, Martin was a very strange guy who I rode with, and I think he's quite kind of on the libertarian end of things. Like, he just does things, and if he doesn't feel like he's actually hurting anybody, he'll just do it. He doesn't ask permission, and I've kind of taken that a little bit. And so I have found since I've come back, I've been doing some things that people just are like, whoa, that is not socially acceptable, like what you just did. oh really? So there has been a bit of a change that has causes some friction between me and the rest of society, but
is that influenced by your time in other cultures where the cultural differences are obviously different to our cultures, or is it just a case of you've spent so much time on your bike doing what you wanted, it's now a case that that's ingrained in your personality?
I think it's the second one. I think it's the second one. And mine had this like this catchphrase where he would always be saying like, it's easier to beg forgiveness than ask permission.
Yeah, that's
like, so now that's it. It's just like if I'm like, I wonder if I can do this. I just do it, and then you find out later whether or not you should have done it.
Yeah.
Which works fine on the bike because if you poison somebody against you, or whatever, it's like you're leaving the next day, so it's not a problem. But now I'm on this tiny island, and occasionally I'm doing things and people are like, whoa, why did you do that? What's wrong with him?
There is certainly a level of reintegration back to society, and
for sure.
And there's something I read an article about reverse culture shock, which is generally people who've been travelling for long periods of time end up coming back to kind of the Western world and just can't handle it. Like having choice in a supermarket, for example. You walk into a supermarket and there's 12 different types of tomato ketchup, and kind of reverse culture shock. Okay, so as far as your trip goes, you flew into the States, right? And then you basically headed south.
I flew into Vancouver, BC, Canada.
Oh, really? That far north? I didn't realize.
Yeah, and then I actually started by going north. Not very far, but I headed kind of north up the mainland, which was probably one of the toughest stretches on the trip because I forgot to pump my tires up all the way before I left. So it was really, really hard work. It's only like 6 days in, I was like, this is really tough. And then I went to a bike shop. I was like, I'm at like 30 PSI. No wonder this is so ridiculous. Like pumped them up and suddenly the trip got a lot better. And then, came down the islands in the, I don't know what it's called, the Gulf Island, I think it was Gulf Island, something like that, I don't know. But they are the islands of British Columbia. And then, just down the coast of the States, and then through Central America, mostly the coast, and then in South America, mostly the mountains.
Okay. And down there's the Darien Gap, right? You can't cycle all the way through. So how did you have to get ferry through there?
You can do it. There was a guy who did it in the 70s. But that's one thing that I did find cool about the Americas in a way, that you couldn't get too attached to the idea of like, I'm going to really cycle every mile. Like I took a couple of buses. And a lot of people are like, no, I could never take a bus. I have to ride every bit. But nobody's ridden the whole length of the Americas since like the 70s. So it doesn't count. Like nobody's doing it really. Because nobody actually rides it properly. I think a guy actually rode through the Gap recently. That Lucas Brunel, the guy who does all those, he films all those illegal bike races, those messenger races.
Yes.
He rode through the Gap recently.
Yeah.
And did a film about it. I haven't seen it yet. I don't know whether he actually rode like side to side or what. There's like bits of him taking a boat and stuff. Yeah, there was just one British guy who did it back in the day. So it is possible. But now it's a lot more dangerous than when he did it. But I just flew. Because the boats are really expensive.
The boats are really expensive. That's
crazy expensive.
Yeah, we have to ship our car through that little section. So.
Are you going to do that?
Yeah.
I hear a lot of people get done doing that. Like, you'll think you're shipping it all the way, and then you end up at some halfway village.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, no, you just paid for the first boat.
Yeah.
The next boat cost you this much. Like I think my aunt and uncle did it, and they got fleeced. It happens a lot.
I know.
Did meet a cyclist who canoed past it, which I had a lot of props for, with the bike on the canoe down the Caribbean side, and he got it's illegal, and he got stopped by the police on the 5th day of a 7-day canoe trip, and they took him all the way back to Panama, and he just started again. Yeah, real adventurer.
There is, and that's one thing that will happen as well. People kind of, but earlier we were talking about kind of setting goals. And certainly I've known a lot of cyclists, and we've bumped into a lot of cyclists who, our goal is to cycle the Premier Highway, for example. We have to cycle every inch of it. We can't take a bus, whatever. And then that's less so about travelling, I think, and it's more. Then it becomes more of a personal challenge, and then I don't know. It becomes again an introspective thing. You're challenging yourself rather than observing the world around you. And I think
for sure, I really wanted to avoid that.
Yeah, for sure. I think you're also putting unnecessary pressure on, and it's detracting from what you've been saying. You wanted to soak up the culture, you wanted to experience and get kind of deep into deep into American culture.
Sure.
So how did you find traveling through Central America and down into South America then? Had you traveled previously anywhere in the region, or it was all brand spanking new to you?
So I had been to the coast of Colombia. I'd been to Cuba before and Mexico, but so Cuba and Mexico was my family, and that was really nice. They like to travel in quite an adventurous way.
Yeah.
So saw quite a bit of the culture and really got into it. But the parts of Mexico that I went to this time I went to Yucatan last time. I didn't do this time.
Yeah.
So I mean, I had some experience of it, but not really at all. Not like this, not like I did. And Central America, I actually found it's not great for cycling, to be honest. It's way too flat. You don't have so many options for a route. I think it'd be great on a motorbike, but a lot of these countries, it's kind of like there's one main highway, and then there's like roads going off that are often dirt roads that go off to see something really nice.
Yeah.
But if you're on your bicycle, it means like 200 miles in one direction and 200 miles to come back. That's like 4 days. If you're doing riding really hard. Plus, you want to enjoy whatever you're going to go out and see. Each time you want to do a diversion and go see something, you're like, am I going to spend like 5 days to just go and see XYZ waterfall, whatever? But and so it ended up that actually it was just kind of just plugging down this road. But I generally, because cycling is so slow, I did make kind of some decisions that some countries I would just hammer through. Some countries I'd be like, right, I'm here to really experience this country.
Yeah.
So I think I really spent some time in the States, Mexico, Nicaragua, Colombia, Peru, and the other ones I just kind of hammered through them.
Yeah.
Just rode.
And it's one of those things that actually, when I was originally planning a trip, it kind of made me decide on a car in the end, because some of these countries are so massive.
Yeah.
There's and you're on visa restrictions, so there's only so much time you can spend in that particular country, and if you actually want to see something, you need to travel at a faster speed than a cycling. So that was one of the reasons.
One of the stands actually in Asia that I've heard people complaining about. They don't actually give you a visa long enough to cycle across the country.
Yeah.
People find that very frustrating.
Yeah. Well, Turkmenistan, you can only ever get a transit visa, which is 5 days max. So if you're cycling, it's a big country and it's through desert as well, so it's not easy cycling.
Yeah, it's tough.
It is tough.
I mean, the visas are pretty sweet in America, though.
Yeah, they're all pretty much on the border, right? Most of them.
Yeah, I didn't have to organise anything ahead of time.
Yeah.
Except for the States, obviously.
Yeah.
Their visa restrictions are pretty low.
Yeah.
And also, it was the worst border that I had to cross. Those guys are dicks, man. Not the Americans. I actually was really surprised by how nice North Americans are, but like those TSA guys.
The authorities. Yeah.
Oh, TSA are horrible. I really feel for any Americans who have to deal with them on a regular basis. They're scumbags.
It's hard work.
Yeah, for sure. And I wasn't even on one of those ones where they grope your balls on the way in. I just got like the verbal frisking.
The verbal frisking, yeah.
No fun.
And then how did you find dealing with the authorities through the rest of your trip? Did you encounter corrupt police? Do you have people trying to take bribes off you? Or
yeah, I mean, so often you come to countries with certain expectations, but actually, once you try to chat to the locals, you generally find out what the deal is.
Yeah.
Like, in Mexico, all the locals are like, just do not trust the police. Like, whatever you do, don't trust them.
Yeah.
And so, you know that I would always just I don't speak Spanish. Like, whenever I had to speak to this police, even if they're talking to me in English, I'd just be like, I don't understand.
Yeah.
And if they're trying to fleece you, generally they just get bored and they just think there's plenty more gringos.
Yeah, move on. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's probably the only country where I felt like the authorities were really, really, really scary, to be honest.
Yeah.
And Mexico's a great country. I don't think anybody should be put off going there. The people are really, really lovely. There's certain areas that the Mexicans would tell you to avoid, and I would avoid them, and I did avoid them. But generally, it's a lovely country. The people are awesome. But the authority, it is a bit weird that you think if something goes wrong, I don't really feel like I can go to the police for help. Whereas in somewhere like Colombia, there's, again, like Mexico, there's two different types of police. I think there's like a federal police and like the other level, like a state level police.
Yeah.
And one of them, I think it's the federales. They're known as like the incorruptibles. And so you know that if you can find one of them, they're going to be fine.
Yeah.
But then there's another set of police where it's like, yeah, maybe they'll be fine, maybe they won't. But generally, I found, authorities were okay, were all right, except for in the States.
So from Colombia, did you travel down through Ecuador and then all the way south?
Yeah, that's right. I just followed the Andes really.
Yeah.
Did a couple of trips down into the flatlands and down to the coast of Peru and stuff, but mainly just stuck to the Andes. It's kind of funny being on the bicycle, but actually a lot of the areas that you'd think would be the places you go to, like the flat areas, are often the worst just because they're so hot and they're so boring.
And no shade.
Yeah, like a lot of people catch kind of mile fever around Peru.
Yeah.
And they just want to do a lot of miles, and so they go down to the coast and they end up doing that section, which is just very deserty, not very interesting, but you can really do a lot of miles because Peru's so mountainous if you stick to that. But the mountains are so lovely, and cycling in the mountains is what it's all about. I love climbing, I love descending.
Yeah.
Like nothing is more boring than just like flat, just turning the pedals, no interest all day.
Yeah.
It's just...
And then as far as you're obviously quite a fit guy, but did you train before you left, or did you literally just get on the bike and you train as you're cycling?
Yeah, I mean, within
the mileage
within
if you
a
need
month,
to.
you're fitter than you've ever been in your life.
Yeah.
So there's no amount of training I could have done that could have got me to that place. I mean, I had some difficulties at the start, weird twinges. You learn stuff as well about how you pack the bike, the ergonomics of the bike, and stuff like that initially cause you some problems. I remember a guy sat me and Martin down and gave us he was a real cycle nerd, and he was completely obsessed by bicycles. I think he gave us about a 20-minute, half an hour conversation about how to hold your handlebars. Like where to put your hands. He was like, never put your hands like this, always put your hands like this. It's like, it's all about the hammocks of your hands. You want to avoid pressure in this area and stuff. And he gave us kind of like 4 or 5 different hand positions for each of our different types of handlebars, and after that I had no problems. But like before that I got a lot of numbness, like weird problems,
nerve damage.
Yeah, but never really like a fitness issue. Fitness, if you're tired, have a rest.
Yeah. And taking obviously on a bicycle you can only carry a limited amount of stuff, and has that kind of stripped down way of living influenced your life in any way? Do you feel less materialistic now you've returned?
Maybe. I don't know. I can definitely see the value of things that are really useful.
Yeah.
My wardrobe has become pretty surplus to requirements. I find that I have no problem now with wearing the same clothes like every weekend.
Yeah.
Somebody asked me the other day, he was like, dude, do you have any other shirts? Every weekend you wear the same shirt. But it's because when I was on the bike, after a while, I just, shirts fall apart and you realize you only really need one.
Yeah.
And then I would wear cycle kit for when I'm on the bike, and it got pretty stripped down. The first thing I did when I got home was throw away about half my stuff.
Yeah.
So I realised just how completely useless it is, and that I just wasn't using it.
I think that certain kind of learning to value and appreciate items, and it gives you a whole new kind of grasp on life. One thing I found really quite liberating was when you're living in this way, it basically stripped back to basics, and you're looking at staying healthy, finding water, finding food. In our case, making sure the car runs. In your case, making sure the bicycle's fine.
Yeah.
And you basically have no kind of exterior concerns outside of your immediate life, which is quite liberating. And that's had quite a big influence on me, certainly since we've been back as well. But yeah, I totally agree with you what you're talking about with clothes. Like, it's hilarious now. Like, I'll stick like clothes in the washing, and Emma will have like 7 pairs of pants, one for every day of the week, and she'll be like, "How many pairs of pants have you worn since you've been back?" And I'm like, "Standard 2. I've been like 7 days in a week," and that's just kind of completely changed. People wash clothes after wearing them once, and I'm like, "Well, it's fine. Look at it."
Yeah.
So that outlook is quite good. So what kind of mileage were you covering every day then? Did you have a set amount, or as the day takes it, or?
Yeah, so I only did a couple of days over 100 miles.
Yeah.
I would generally, I'm just generally tracking my mileage in kilometers. I would do, on the flat, I would do like 100 to 120 kilometers in a day.
Yeah.
Sometimes a bit more, sometimes up to like 140 and stuff. In the mountains, generally less, like 80 kilometers probably in a day. But yeah, I mean, it would depend on the situation. There was a point where I really was getting the mile fever in Mexico. I was getting it real bad. I just wanted to turn out like a lot of miles.
Yeah.
And Martin and I had both been chasing the century, the 100-mile day.
Yeah, yeah.
And I had this day where I was like, this is going to be the day. This is going to be when I'm going to make my century. And just everything was going wrong. Like, you know, there was nowhere to eat at the right time and stuff like that. And it's just looking worse and worse. And I was just trying to ride harder and harder and harder. It was baking hot. And I was just getting more and more worried about it. And then I had 2 HGVs in a row, 2 big trucks that passed me, probably the closest that I've been passed in my whole trip. It was just, you know, just right. The whole length of the truck is just
inches away. Yeah.
Your elbow. And it happened 2 in a row. And there was no shoulder to go on. There was just like a meter drop off the side of the tarmac. And they came so close and they hurtled past me. And I just like threw the bike down, just like walked out into this field. And like, you know, I had a friend who was killed on the roads in London. I just thought about her. I just burst into tears in this field. I was just like, what am I doing? This is crazy. This is not a holiday. Like, I'm not enjoying this. Like, how am I getting so consumed by something so stupid? And I just made a promise to myself I wouldn't try to do 100 miles again. And I just thought, you know, what is this trip really about? So I got back on the bike and I rode a little way until I found like a service road that led off into the cactus. Went down the service road, set up my tent, stripped completely naked, like smoked a cigarette, read my book, just like sunbathed in the nude, just like looked out. I was like in Baja, California, like everywhere I look, there's just like cactus. This is amazing. This is what it's about. Doesn't matter how many miles you do a day.
Yeah.
This is what I'm going to do. A lot more nudity, a lot more chilling out, like a lot more just doing whatever I feel like at the time, and a lot less trying to, you know, set goals and achieve things. And, but it's a problem for all cyclists. They do definitely get distracted by the miles sometimes. You do see it in their eyes. Sometimes people get mile fever. Yeah. And they make silly decisions about routes and about, you know, not staying in places that they're really interested in and stuff like that because they just get taken over. And even after making that oath, like I still sometimes get it. And sometimes people, you know, it take people to remind you that you're not enjoying yourself and you're just getting consumed by trying to get miles in, which can't be a thing on the car, surely. Do you get that? Where you're
no, not at all.
No, not an issue.
No.
Press the pedal and the thing goes.
And the only time we've had that is when we had to come back from Mongolia when both my parents were ill. That was the only time, and it was hell. It was horrible. It wasn't enjoyable.
Oh, good. Yeah, that time's not going to be enjoyable.
No. So, but as far as so physically, you probably the healthiest you've been, right? You've been doing that much exercise.
That stuff drops off so quickly, especially with Guernsey life. I didn't really drink much while I was away either.
Yeah, but not so much now. Not so much now. But when you were traveling, like physically, the best shape you've ever been in.
Yeah.
And how did that?
Because I probably one of the parts where I pushed the most.
Yeah.
And it was, but it was because I wanted to. It's because I hit a point where I was like, I'd done a lot of hanging around in Bolivia and stuff, and just being in cities for quite a while, hanging out with Martin. And then I was just like, you know what? I just want to ride some major miles, and I just absolutely rinsed down Argentina, just doing big days every day, getting up early, like going to bed when the sun goes down, and then waking up before the sun comes up and getting ready, being ready by the time the sun peaks over the horizon and just setting off.
Yeah.
And I was just pushing so hard there. Then when I got down to Patagonia, I did some hikes, and I just felt like an absolute machine.
Yeah.
It was incredible, and my body will never be as capable as it was then. And I just felt like I could do anything, you know. Like, just if I see somewhere, I'm like, I'm going to run to there, like with my rucksack on my back, and you could just do it. Like, you could just ask anything of your body, and it could deliver.
And it would do it.
Unbelievable.
And then did that reflect mentally as well? Then were you feeling?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I think the two are certainly interconnected. And if your body's feeling healthy, then your mind is generally mentally feeling healthy.
Sure.
And one thing I found really interesting, I was chatting to my friend Mike, who we're a shared friend, you also know him, and after he had completed the 5 marathons in 4 days through the Sahara,
The Marathon des Sables.
The Marathon des Sables, yeah.
Oh,
and he mentioned something in a conversation we were having once that you really become in touch with your body, what your body's craving, what your body needs to fulfill that kind of physical enjoyment.
Yeah.
Did you have that on the road? Did you become, hyper aware of what your body needs, and how do you manage to carry that much food? Because I presume you need high carb food, right?
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, Martin gave me quite a lot of tips about that. I mean, he came from kind of a light backpacking background, like hiking with a canoe and stuff in Canada. So like every now and then you've got to portage the canoe and all your stuff, and the canoe's so heavy you want everything else to be light as possible.
Yeah.
And so he had a lot of tips for that. Generally, I would usually carry like one hot meal and one cold meal, because really there's always a village within 60 miles. People think there's going to be these huge expanses of wilderness, but it really isn't like that in these areas. Like every 60 miles, you'll find a shop, you'll buy something. As long as you're not too fussy, you'll be all right. So generally, my morning meal and my evening meal would usually be the same. I would soak some oats with some dried fruit in overnight and eat that in the morning, just raw, but like soaked. And that's really nice. Yeah. Really nice way to start off the day. And then, some kind of lunch would usually just be like, often it would be just bread and then like dulce de leche or something like that. Just like a caramelly syrup that you just spread on the bread and eat that, or avocados that you just spread on the bread. That's really nice with some salt. And then the evening would just be pasta, soup, powder, and a tin of tuna. And that was pretty much my diet most of the time.
Yeah.
For the last sections. And then often, if I passed a place to eat at the right time for lunch, I would often have like a cooked lunch. That'd be great.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah, because food was a big part of it for me as well. Was like the food culture, and absorbing some of that. So I did always set aside like quite a lot of money for eating sweet meals and just having really great food.
Yeah.
Enjoying that aspect of it. So actually, when you think about it, none of that weighs much. So I didn't really have to carry much food at all. When you start, you carry so much spare everything, and then it just gradually, you realise every time you have to do a massive hill and you really suffer it. You get, you camp, or you go into a hotel room in the evening, you spread your stuff out, and you're like, right, I'm going to get rid of some of this. And I think about some of the stuff I left with, it was nuts. Like, I had 2 film cameras, I had a slack line, like all crazy stuff that weighed so much. I used the slack line once, and it was this washing line, and then I gave it away. It's just like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah. That's, again, that goes back to something we were talking about earlier, that kind of stripped down lifestyle. And you mentioned that you had 2 film cameras, and it's not very often these days people still use film cameras. And I think you had a digital camera as well, right?
Yeah, so I didn't actually use the film camera much. So I had one heavy like metal rangefinder, a Yashica that I sent that home.
Yeah. And
the one that I actually kept with me was just a little toy camera, a little plastic one.
Yeah.
And I mainly the photos that you saw, the film photos I took, those were mainly from in Nicaragua. I got robbed by bandits and they took my camera. So then I had a section where I was just using the film camera all the time. And so I got some nice photos then. But I don't really have the discipline when I got the digital like at my hip. I would have it like within easy reach all the time. I don't really have the discipline to pull out the film camera when I've got the digital.
Yeah. The reason I found that quite interesting was when you're traveling, if you have a digital camera, it's so easy just to reel off photographs. And then I think if you're spending half your life looking through a little digital screen on a camera, it's all time you're not actually spending taking in the experience. And so your memories aren't necessarily of the things you've actually been looking at, they're of the photographs that exist. And so when you're kind of looking back, you're like, oh, I remember that photograph, but you don't actually remember the actual experience.
I found a much better way to record the thing. I mean, the photographs were great and stuff, and I want to get a lot printed up and display them.
Yeah.
But the best thing for the experience and for processing the experience was writing a diary.
Okay, that was going to be my next question actually. So you kept a diary.
I did, yeah.
And then what's your plan with that diary? Because before we were talking about social media and how sharing your experience is important. Is it important for you to see other people to see that diary, or does that diary exist purely for you to help process what you've been through?
I don't know. I guess if I really thought that people would enjoy reading it, I would do something with it. But I don't know. I mean, I was definitely writing it just for me.
Yeah.
And there's some nuts stuff in there that I definitely wouldn't want anybody to read. Like, I was very honest with the experiences I was having. And the thing is with a diary as well, like when you're having a good time, you're not going to put an hour aside to write a diary.
Yeah,
so you spend a lot more time writing it when you're having a terrible time. Yeah. So I think when I read it back, it's going to put quite a negative slant on the whole trip. Being like, I'm so bored, I'm so lonely, all I've got is my diary right now and stuff like that. And when you've actually got like friends and you're doing some stuff and you're staying in an area and
so just
adventures, you're not going to write it.
Yeah. So to some degree, the diary skews the level of happiness you're actually going for.
I think so. I've got to go back and read it now, to be honest, because it's like 2 years since I started writing it.
Yeah.
I think I left like October 17th. So yeah, coming up to like the second anniversary of leaving. Yeah. So it'd be nice to kind of start again and start reading it. And it would be nice to kind of type it up and then fill in some of the gaps, because I think I would remember some things that I didn't write down that I could maybe fill in.
And I think certainly, I don't know how important it is to you, but for me, having a record of the things I've achieved in my life is I don't know. I think it's because I come from an art background, and I've typically have always documented pretty much everything I've done throughout my life, and I to some degree, I feel there's some kind of importance in there, and I don't know if it gives me self-worth or I don't know. It kind of compounds to other people the things I've achieved in life, which then in turn makes me feel good about myself. I'm not entirely sure, but I do think it is important to document the things you do throughout your life. And just then you mentioned in your diary there's some quite dark stuff, and you said you were feeling lonely. I can see how that would be on a bicycle. I think there's the classic, the loneliness of the long distance runner. I think you when you spend that much time, heading in one direction and being so introspective, I think it can be quite easy for the loneliness to creep in. Were there ever times you just wanted to just like give up and just go home and just be like, screw this, I can't be doing this anymore?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it was interesting, actually. I learned to know when I was most susceptible to those feelings as well.
Yeah.
Like often in the morning when you have to pack up all your stuff, I would just be terrible. I'm not a very good morning person, and often in those points I'd be like, oh, this is long. I just want to be back in Guernsey, like see my family and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But then when I actually got on the bike, I feel amazing. But you kind of learn when you're susceptible to it, and you're like, come on, Jack, you always feel like this at this time of day. Just do the bit, like pack up the bags, and then we'll get riding, and then you'll feel better. Okay, let's do this.
Yeah. And how much, obviously on a bicycle you have a whole different experience to being in a vehicle. And one thing that really appeals to me about doing a bike trip like this is you're open to the elements, you feel every bump through your bicycle, you get to experience all the smells, if it's hot outside, you're hot. If it's pouring down with rain, you're getting drenched.
Yeah, you're wet.
And that kind of, that level of contact with the country really interests me, but does it get to a point where that kind of slowly grinds you down? Or have you kind of elevated yourself above that and you just think, yeah, this is all part of it. This is just as much fun as when it's, I'm having a great day.
Yeah, I mean, it can do, and it means that there's certain weird stuff that does kind of taint your experience a lot. So for example, I hate Panama, but not really for any reason other than they were roadworks all the way down the Pan American for that section. So I had to ride on these terrible temporary surfaces. And it would just make for the worst days ever. And
when cars go past, does it kick up all the dust and you're breathing all that stuff in?
Just horrible. Okay. And there's you get so excited when a certain plant is not around anymore. There's these goat heads in Mexico. They like put down these weird like thorny lumps that just mess your tires up, and just they would really like spoil your day. Every time you pull off, you'd have to like rub down your tires to make sure there were no goat heads on them and stuff like that. And it's weird little tricks. You know, you can be having a terrible day, and then suddenly the surface of the road changes to the smoothest tarmac ever, and suddenly your day is incredible. And other people would go past that point and wouldn't even notice anything. But that made a huge difference to your mood, that suddenly you were just sailing over this smooth surface. Like, yeah, making miles, just like getting a lot out of your cycling. But so yeah, you do get linked to that physical stuff. The weather thing wasn't really a big issue. I liked experiencing it all. Sometimes it was just too hot, but like, yeah, there wasn't a huge amount of rain, to be honest. But yeah, getting wet and during that, it's all part of it, just being out in the elements. I love living outside. That's what I really liked about the whole thing, was being able to be outside for such a huge part of my day every day. It's great.
And that kind of contact with nature, has that, now you've returned back to Guernsey, do you miss that, or because obviously Guernsey is quite a small island, and it's very difficult to find wilderness places where you literally can't see another house, or it's difficult to find places where you're that far away from other people.
Sure.
Did you find it quite claustrophobic coming back?
No, not really. I mean, obviously it is more claustrophobic. I don't get to spend as much time outside, but actually being on the bike made me realise very quickly that Guernsey is my home, how much I missed it, and you know, I am much more excited about being able to see my gran on a regular basis, being able to see my family on a regular basis. A lot of my friends are back here still, so being able to see my friends, you know, having a bed that I go back to every night, stuff like that. I really enjoy all those things.
Yeah.
And you know, getting back into my job, I'm really enjoying that too. And so I'm kind of so thankful for the things that I've gained from coming back to Guernsey that, I don't know, I mean, it was very special to live outside like that, and I would love to do it again sometime, but I'm more thankful for the things that I've gained by coming back than the things I've lost. Yeah. You know, I met a lot of cyclists who, you know, they got a couple of months into their trip and they would just be saying, you know, I just need to figure out how I can do this forever, how I can make this sustainable and just be like a cycle tourist, and that'll be it, that'll be my life. I would just think, why? Why would you want that? Like, for your whole life, you know, you never have any long-term relationships or anything like that. You know, when you're on a bicycle, even other cyclists don't move at the same pace as you, let alone people who are traveling by bus or traveling by car, or whatever. So you know, if you want to make any kind of meaningful relationship, you've got to stop riding and stay in one place.
Yeah. Or
you've got to ride really hard and meet somebody at a certain place, and who knows if you're actually going to make it there or not. Or you've got to find another cyclist who goes at the same pace as you. And so you can't really make any long-term friendships or any like deep meaning. I mean, you get meaningful short-term relationships, obviously, but like any of these things where you really know somebody over a long time, you just can't do that for like a year and a half. And now I'm coming back and I see all the friends that I've known for years, and it's just fantastic.
Yeah.
I love it. I never felt tempted to be like, I just want to be a cycle tourist forever. I enjoyed the experience wholeheartedly, and every moment of it was great, but it never felt like something that I could just live.
Yeah.
Cool. I can never remember the question when I reached the end of my answer. I'm like, did you actually ask me anything about that? Like, I have no idea.
Well, the whole point of these podcasts is it becomes more a conversation. Like, I don't like. It's funny. I have a whole load of standard fallback questions that if I occasionally get lost for words, or if the conversation is going awry, I can fall back to them. But I hardly ever use them because I like the way, you know, typically as an, I don't want to call myself an interviewer because I'm certainly not. I like to see myself as I don't know, the hub in the middle of a wheel that basically brings everyone together. I guess I don't know. I don't know the best analogy to describe. But you know, I just want to be here just to kind of tease stories, emotions, and so that people who've actually gone through these experiences can share them, and people who are planning to do trips like this kind of have a bit of a heads up about what they might possibly be getting into. And obviously everyone's experiences are very different and very diverse, which is why I was really excited to speak to you, because obviously I've known you for a long time, and I know that you're the type of person that really gets involved in whatever they're doing. So in that regard, I was, really happy to speak to you.
Yeah, I do find it a bit weird to talk about it. Like, I haven't talked about it a huge amount since I come back, and it's not like I talk all the time about my experiences. I'm well aware that when you come back from like a big holiday, people people often get pretty sick of you talking about it. So I don't actually talk about it a lot, and it was mainly the experience that I wanted, and it was never about kind of telling other people. So it's a bit strange sitting down and talking about it like this. Are you going to interview, like, because you're saying like cyclists, motorcyclists, and car drivers? What about like hitchhikers and runners? I met a guy who was running like a lot of the. He was going to run the whole length. I think he stopped in Uruguay in the end.
Yeah, certainly. I think anyone who's kind of experiencing self-reliant travel, and the reason I initially didn't say that is because they're so few and far between. But we have certainly met a few people. I think hitchhiking is slightly different. Like, I don't know. I quite like the idea that you're reliant on a vehicle to some degree, whereas if you're hitchhiking, you're only reliant on your skill to find someone with a vehicle. I think throwing the vehicle into the equation just complicates it a little bit to some degree, and then you have a relationship with whatever kind of vehicle you're on, which dictates where you go and what you see. So as a hitchhiker, you're not fully in control of the places that you can get to. You know, you can only take a route if someone else is driving that route and willing to pick you up.
Sure. I mean, that's an additional. Just a different complication that comes from the method of transport. You know. Yeah,
which I find quite interesting, and I do like that relationship between man and machine or woman and machine.
One thing I find interesting about the motorized transport thing is, like, do you have to have some discipline to not always stop in settlements? Do you have to like make yourself stop in the middle of nowhere?
No, we generally prefer to stop in the middle of nowhere if we can find a place. The only place that becomes problematic is in cities, really.
Well, like finding you have to park up and stuff like that.
And especially in our vehicle, it's really obvious we're sleeping in it, because once you've popped the tent on the roof, it's like, there's people sleeping in there. Which is problematic with the authorities. It's problematic for people who want to rob you. Well, not problematic for them, easy for them.
It's great for them. They love that.
But problematic for us. So that's the only time it becomes a problem. And like, I'm incredibly envious of people on bicycles, because it's very easy on a bicycle for you to hide and pop a tent, whereas our vehicle, as much as it is an off-road vehicle, it can be difficult to get off the road sometimes. Like, especially, Scandinavia is the great example that there's all these amazing wilderness places. They're actually incredible, but even in our vehicle, you can't get to them because there's a big drainage ditch either side of the road, so you literally can't get off the main road. So if you're hiking or on a bicycle, fine, you can go off into the wilderness, no problem. But
yeah, sure. Well, I mean, you say that, but really the bicycle is very linked to asphalt, unfortunately. I mean, I did ride a lot of dirt track and stuff, and I crossed the Atacama with the bike, and that was intense. Really, really tough, and was mostly pushing it. But actually, if you're going to ride, you really want kind of a tarmac road.
Yeah.
Or at least like decent quality dirt road. Not like real deep loose gravel or like corrugated there's corrugated dirt roads that you get.
The corrugated dirt roads are bad, even in a vehicle.
Rough, man.
They're horrendous.
I think motorbike might be the best way to hit those.
Yeah.
Met a motorbike guy who was like, you just need to. He was doing that Atacama as well, and it's really corrugated across there. It's horrible.
Yeah.
And he was like, you just need to hit that certain speed.
Yeah, you find the sweet spot.
And I was like, what is that speed? He was like, well, around here it seems to be about 90 kilometers an hour. I was like, this is like the desert sand. You're just like caning across it at this incredible speed.
I'm really looking forward to interviewing some motorbikers. We've got a few lined up, because obviously we've met a lot as we've been travelling.
Sure.
And again, for me, there are pros and cons to every kind of vehicle travel, but the motorbike seems to be the one where you've got the balance of really being in contact and feeling the elements and being in contact with the earth, but still having the leisure of being able to travel large distances quickly. So there's always a compromise. So
I can see the pleasure of that. I have to say, motorbike. If I was going to do another one, I would think about a motorbike.
Yeah, and you've got the ease of shipping. It's easier to ship a motorbike. You can even fly a motorbike if you got the money or that way inclined. Whereas a car or a truck is often problematic.
Yeah, also it's just cheaper to buy one that can serve your purpose as well. You can just go out somewhere and buy one.
Exactly.
You see a lot of motorbikers on their like all-terrain bikes and stuff. But I met a French dude who was just buying just whatever beaten up Honda, Suzuki or whatever. He would go out somewhere, buy one for a couple of $100. Had everything in a big waterproof holdall that would just like plunge you to the back.
Yeah.
He would just set off on that. So his bikes were horrible, but just like crappy dirt bikes. He would be able to go anywhere he wanted still. And if you buy parts, not a big issue.
Yeah.
Definitely. Did you do much repairing of your 4x4?
Yeah, we had quite a lot of problems. So it's
For yourself, I mean.
Yeah, some jobs. Occasionally we had quite a lot of jobs that required welding, which obviously you can't do yourself because you don't have the equipment to do it. But all the general servicing I would do, and if it was a smaller job that I was confident enough to do, and we were in a place where it was easy enough to get the parts, and if we were in a place where if I screwed it up, I could still get someone to come and repair it, I would generally attempt it. And again, that's something that appeals to me with a bicycle. You know, I grew up riding a lot of bikes, used to build my own bikes, strip them down, repair them, and the simplicity of that machine is something that I find very appealing.
Yeah.
Which is, I don't know. Basically, I'm incredibly envious of you, Jack.
I can understand that.
Right, anyway, I'm aware that I think we're just approaching the hour, and I would love to sit and chat with you for longer. But I think we've had an interesting chat.
Okay.
And I've learnt a lot, actually. It's I've managed to ask a lot of the questions that I haven't had the chance to ask a lot of cyclists. So.
Really? Nice.
Yeah, cool. I think it's insightful just to hear about other people's experiences, and obviously I know you, and I've seen your photographs, so for me it's I've got that added layer of appreciation of what you've achieved, so it's really cool.
Nice, man.
Okay,
so you're going out again?
Yeah, our plan is we want to do what you've just done, actually. Is
Nice.
We're not sure. We'll probably go south to north. I think we'll start in South America, then head up through Central and try and get up as far as Alaska.
Cool.
But it's not going to be for a little while yet. So.
Nice.
Perfect.
Good luck.
Yeah, thank you. Just before we go, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I've already given my shout out to Martin Wong. He's my boy.
Yeah.
Give a shout out to Chris White as well, Rainbow Warrior. He's another cyclist I spent a bit of time with.
Yeah.
I wonder how he's adapting to things. And, yeah, I don't think there's anything else to add. I guess like if you get tempted, anybody out there, if you get tempted to do this and the opportunity comes up, just go for it.
Yeah. Good.
Gotta jump in.
That seems like a good point to finish on. Okay, thank you, Jack. Thank you for your time.
No worries. Thank you, man.
Thanks. In this episode, Jack briefly mentioned the death of his close friend Ellie. Ellie Carey was a mutual friend of ours who was tragically killed while cycling in London in 2011. Sadly, Ellie isn't the only cyclist I'd like to dedicate this episode to. My wife Emma's best friend, Ailey Kearns, was also tragically killed in similar circumstances in London in 2009. And finally, I'd also like to dedicate this episode to Peter Root and Mary Thompson, two incredibly inspiring friends of mine who were tragically killed in Thailand whilst following their dream of cycling around the world. Well, thanks for listening. Hopefully you guys found that as interesting as I did. Next week we'll be talking to Land Rover Defender adventurer Paul Crittenden in what will be another enthralling episode of the Overlanding podcast. If you enjoy our podcast, please subscribe and review us on iTunes and Stitcher by searching the Overlanding podcast. And please check out our website, www.theoverlandingpodcast.com. On there you'll find supporting information, photos and links about each episode. We'd love to engage with our listeners, so please find us on Facebook /The Overlanding Podcast. You can help support the show just by listening and telling others about it. If you like what you've heard, please share it with your friends and help spread the word. If you're an overlander yourself and have an interesting story, we'd love to hear from you. We'd especially like to hear from cyclists and motorcyclists who have undertaken longer trips. You can email us at aroundtheworldin800days@mail.com. Subject heading, podcast interview. Okay, until next week, happy adventuring.